Welcome back to the Kickstart Garage. I'm your host, Sam John Byrne, and I'm accompanied by my co-host, Gavin Quigley. On today's show, we're joined by co-founder and CEO of Spark Crowdfunding, Chris Burge. Welcome to the show, Chris. How are you?
Nice to meet you guys. Thanks very much for having me on.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty, could you give our audience a bit of background about yourself?
Sure. I've background. I'm an engineer. I graduated from Coventry University back in a long time ago, 30 years ago, I think it was now. And worked around the world in various countries in an engineering format. I moved over to Ireland 20 years ago, 21 years ago, Easter 2000. I moved over. And I've lived here since, and I've had a couple of roles, but more recently, obviously, Spark Crowdfunding, which I think we'll talk about in a little bit more detail later on.
Absolutely, we will. And I could see from your LinkedIn that you did your master's in energy management with your thesis on is Ireland's infrastructure ready for mass deployment of electric vehicles, which seems to be a topic more prevalent now given the systemic shift globally away from petrol and diesel towards electric vehicles. I was wondering, before we get into more questions regarding Spark crowdfunding, could you talk to us a bit about your thesis in the context of what does Ireland's infrastructure need to accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles, and what was your conclusion at the time? Does it still hold?
Yeah, I wrote this 2010, so 11 years ago now. And at the time, obviously, I was very keen on doing something along the energy management side of things, and subsequently started a business in energy consulting. But at the time, we were obviously electric vehicles were quite nascent at the time, but nevertheless, established to a point where you could see that there was going to be adoption. But as the adoption has grown, obviously, it is causing, well, it's not just the adoption of electric vehicles, but it's more data centers that's really causing the problem here in Ireland at the moment. But but the deployment of electric vehicles across the network is going to cause further complications and excess demand on the grid that probably wasn't there. Well, definitely wasn't there before. So it will complicate things. But the adoption is growing, not as quickly as most people would like, but nevertheless, it is getting more and more standard, if you like, to see an electric vehicle on the road. Whereas probably even 5 years, 6 years ago, it was quite strange to actually see an electric vehicle there. But it is growing, and it will accelerate definitely. The grid, air grid, needs to actually plan in detail, for the mass adoption of these, and also the different types of loading it will actually have on the grid, and when these vehicles are going to be loaded. Of course, the normal peak for the electricity grid is from 8 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock at night. Whereas, of course, the cars, the vehicles, particularly if people are going to be commuting, are going to be plugged in overnight. So the actual demand for electricity to charge the vehicles is at night time, which is good because it then kind of you can use the off peak electricity to charge them, which is ideal for what air grid need. But nevertheless, they will need to kind of consider the bigger demand that the mass rollout will give them.
I got my first ever Energia bill there. I moved into this house last month, exactly a month ago. So I'm learning all about that and checking the meter as like a day-night meter, and I really feel like an adult just trying to wrap my head around it all. So it's pretty interesting to hear that. Chris, you have a fantastic short and sweet LinkedIn bio, which reads engineer and entrepreneur. A lot of people tend to choose one path or the other. Was it a case of developing the taste for entrepreneurship as your career in engineering developed, or have you always had a love for both?
I was very keen to get into engineering and really enjoyed it as an early career. But I always kind of looked at the commercial side of things in with want and desire as well. And as my career progressed, I kind of wanted to get more and more into that, and I developed a number of kind of kind of small businesses up to this point, and wanted to kind of get into the entrepreneurship side of things as well. Develop my own business and kind of go it alone, and did that with Bravo Energy, of course, to a certain extent, and some other small projects alongside that. But obviously, Spark was the one that is kind of moved quicker than most others, and I find myself now CEO of a startup that's been going now for 3 and a bit years, and is accelerating away, thankfully. So yeah, no, I enjoy both sides of it, and I'm still very much a kind of a hands-on person, and kind of like getting my hands dirty with engineering type things or DIY type things as well, which is useful. But no, I miss some elements of engineering, absolutely, but I absolutely love the entrepreneurship side of things as well, though.
Yeah, it reminds me of I think it's Ernest Hemingway quote, gradually, then suddenly, all of the bits and elements of your career and bits of experience all kind of culminate. And people probably think it's like an overnight success, but it's kind of like an amalgamation of everything that leads to such a quick results, I suppose. Earlier in your career, and we will get into Spark pretty soon, but earlier in your career, and I really wanted to ask you this, you spent some time, I believe, obviously you're from the UK, I believe, and it was with a Federal Mogul. You also operate in the US, France, South African markets. Do you feel that being exposed to these different cultures early on helped you in like dealing with people and building relationships later on and now in your career?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, having that, and I was very, very fortunate to kind of have that ability to travel with my early engineering career. And as you say, you kind of worked in the States and South Africa and France and Japan as well. And they've all got very strong identities, and you have to flex with that. You can't go in with an entrenched kind of way that people need to work or need to kind of even socialize. You have to kind of be very flexible and adapt to those local ways of working. And so yes, you do have to kind of temper your own culture, and adopt the local one as well, because otherwise you're just pushing against a closed door, and it's not going to work. People are going to be alienated if you're not flexible in that way. So yes, absolutely, you do. And as I say, I was very fortunate to be able to get that opportunity to learn those skills at an early age, and it has absolutely helped me further on in my career, definitely.
So, Chris, we'll get into Spark very soon, but you're also the owner of Bravo Energy. You alluded to that a second ago. A consultancy specializing in all areas around energy management. And you've had some pretty big clients, including the likes of PwC, Irish Life, Three, Arthur Cox, AIG, among others. What are some of the common issues that you see in these companies, and how do you help them to address these effectively?
The common denominator, I suppose, with regards to all of these companies and energy is the fact that they just don't manage it properly, and it's been a kind of one of the things that has just been very slow to be adopted. Where people, they obviously they look at their main core of their business, and if it's Three or Telefonica as it was before it moved to Three, they're in the phone business, and they need to kind of make sure that their platform is secure and everything else, and that's great, and they do that very, very well. But they also need to kind of make sure that they are managing their energy properly, and up to this point, and maybe a few years ago they weren't. Maybe they are now, of course. But yes, the common denominator across all of them was that the energy was something that happened. That we'll look at that some other time. But until you're actually monitoring it, you can't manage it, of course. And so, as the old adage goes, so you need to kind of first of all start looking at it and making sure that you know the energy that you're using, where is it being used? Is it being used kind of in lighting? Is it heating? Is it where is it being used? And then you can start to kind of manage it at some point as well after that. So that would be the common denominator across all of those businesses that I was fortunate to enough to work in.
Fantastic, cool. We're going to switch over now to Spark Crowdfunding, and peer-to-peer platforms have been explosive over the past few years. It's really a unique service offering. Could you talk to us how you came up with the idea for Spark Crowdfunding and what was your biggest challenge you encountered while getting that idea to market?
Well, I mean, crowdfunding as a concept isn't new, and we didn't really develop the equity crowdfunding side. It was already there, and there were a couple of big companies in the UK who did it, and across the states, and in fact, it was actually devised in Australia about 12, 13 years ago now. So it's something that we didn't devise. We saw the rise of it across those jurisdictions, and we thought, well, why don't we have it here in Ireland? So we started investigating it more and more, and thought, yes, this is a great idea, and let's start it up. So we did. The biggest challenge, though, is kind of with every two-sided marketplace, and of course we have investees on one side and investors on the other. Is building them both up slowly, so that we don't have too many investees to our investors, and don't have too many investors to our investees as well. So we have to kind of be do it gently, and we did, and we started off quite prudently and carefully, and making sure that we were not unbalancing the scales, and grew to where we are now. So that was the biggest challenge, I think, is the actual balancing that two-sided marketplace.
Sam has some really great follow-on questions, but just before we go into the real kind of complex investor-related questions and things like that, I wanted to just ask, I believe, like you mentioned there, Spark, it's the first equity crowdfunding platform in Ireland. Of course, the idea was it already existed in the UK, like you said, but what is the biggest significance of this for the investor, for the business, and how does equity crowdfunding compare to like a normal crowdfunding or debt crowdfunding?
Well, the equity compared to debt is quite a different instrument, of course. With the debt function as an investor, you're putting your money in. Yes, it's at risk, of course it is, but you're expecting to get it paid back. Kind of even in month one, you're expecting a proportion of that money back in month one, with interest, of course, as well. Whereas, of course, with the equity side of things, it's more silent, in so much that you put the money in month one or year one, and you probably don't expect to see that back for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or even 7 years, even in some cases. So, but when you do get it back, you expect to see it back, not with a 20% or 15% coupon, as you would do with debt, but you're expecting to see that double, triple, quadruple, have a multiple of 10 or even 15 times your investment. So if you put 1 grand in, you're hopefully seeing 5 or 7 or 10 or 15 grand back in 3, 4, 5 years time as well. So there's a big difference in it. But of course, there's a bigger risk, of course, as well, because we know that companies fail, and we know that probably 5 out of 10 companies fail, but you hope the other 5 that you've invested in are going to do well, and give you a big multiple of in return. And that's really the difference between debt and equity, on that side of things.
And I've seen from your promotional videos on YouTube that you provide investors with regular opportunities to invest in various companies. How does Spark Funding attract those companies looking for investment, and why do they side with Spark Crowdfunding over other equity crowdfunding platforms?
Well, as you said, we're the first and the only equity crowdfunding company in Ireland, and when we like to think that that Irish investors like to invest in Irish businesses. So that's a very strong element to it, and so therefore, if you are a young Irish company, why would you go over to the UK to raise money? Well, there are a couple of reasons why, but there are stronger reasons why you should stay here. One of which is this thing called EIS, which is a tax incentive that the government very generously gives investors to avail of when they invest in young Irish businesses, which wouldn't be available to an Irish company and investors if they did it in the UK as well. So that's one big reason. But we've taken the concept of crowdfunding, and we've tweaked it to really suit the Irish the Irish market, both on the investee side and on the investor side. So the UK companies will often just kind of give you access to the platform and away you go after they've done an element of due diligence. Obviously, we very much curate the companies that are on our platform. So we're very selective. We probably only take about 1 in 10, 1 in 11 companies onto the platform that apply to us. And so we're offering our investors a very carefully selected group of companies that we think are investable in, of course. Otherwise, they wouldn't go onto the platform. And we think that that's a very strong, compelling reason why Irish companies should should go onto the platform here so that they can give the Irish investors the EIS tax incentive, but also the strength of which that we show to our investors of the quality of the businesses that are there.
What would typically be the selection criteria for the companies that you do select to go onto your platform?
It's wide and varied, and a lot of it is, our experience, obviously, of looking at young startup businesses now. But I mean, it isn't very different from that of the criteria that are used for Enterprise Ireland or for VCs around the country as well. There has to be a very strong team, and that team has to be able to kind of demonstrate that they are have business acumen and can control a young startup business and the complexities that are involved with that. But also, the companies, we like to see an element of IP in there as well, so that there's a good bit of protection that others can't come in and just copy. We like to see that there's traction in the market, that the customers are actually willing to pay for this service or pay for this product as well. So, but there's a whole host of other kind of things that we look at, and we have an application form as everybody else does. That kind of starts to weed out a lot of those things quite an early stage, and we can see from that application form, the strength of these companies. But they're probably three key elements that we are keen to see and keen to look for as well.
And on the other side of the platform, then, of course, as an investor looking to get started on Spark crowdfunding, like, are there any specific prerequisites that I would need to meet, such as, like, is there minimum investments for each company? Does that depend on the company's preferences, or do you need to provide like salary details? How would that look like for the other side?
So you have to be a member of the platform in order to invest. So there's a very simple criteria that an application form, but I mean it literally only takes a couple of minutes to actually fill out. You have to declare your liquid assets, how much liquid asset you've got, and that's an element of as for us to decide, are you overspending, are you overstretching yourself, and we kind of monitor that quite carefully as well, to make sure that people aren't doing that. So if they've declared for example, liquid assets of X, then we have to make sure that they're not spending up to X, because that would obviously just mean that they are overstretching themselves. So that's the first element to it. The minimum investment is only €100. So most people can afford to put in at that stage. We try and encourage people to go to the next level, which is let's say the next level, to put in 250, because at 250 you're actually getting 40% back in this EIS incentive that I mentioned earlier on. Whereas if you invest below 250, you don't. So we're very keen to show people that is a good way of doing it. So the criteria otherwise are very open, and we take anybody who wants to invest. Of course, you need to make sure that you're not, as I say, overstretching yourself, and we also encourage a diversified portfolio approach where you invest small amounts in many companies, as opposed to trying to pick a winner, because of course if that winner does fall and stumble at one of the fences, then you've lost everything. Whereas if you've invested over a whole portfolio, then hopefully you'll get 2 or 3 or 4 or even 5 winners, and obviously there'll be a couple of losers there as well. But as I say, we curate our companies very carefully, and we'd like to think that the statistic of the 5 out of 10 or even 6 out of 10 that fail is less on our platform because of the fact that we have been careful in selecting the businesses to show our investors.
I think that's pretty important as well because I know from dealing with certain debt or debt crowdfunding platforms, and when a project goes up, they get funded within 1 second, 2 second, and you don't get the chance to do your own due diligence actually on the project, and you almost have to set up a quantitative strategy in order to do the auto funding or anything like that. So I think companies being transparent, especially in the crowdfunding space with their selection, I think it's fantastic. And I'm sure there's been many successful companies on Spark Crowdfunding. Most notably, actually, we had Charlie Gleason from Zip Mobility on. We've seen that he's raised a bit of funds as well on it. But from the successful campaigns that you've seen, what separates a successful pitch from an unsuccessful one?
Well, we've actually in the last 2 years we've had 100% success rate. So every company that's actually gone onto the platform has gone on to raise the required funding. So there haven't been too many failures, which is great for us and great for the companies. But I suppose the ones that have kind of failed to reach the target amount that they initially wanted, probably because they were good businesses. We still liked them, and we still thought that they were strong candidates, but probably just didn't uh, t- uh, click with the investors. I think that's probably the only way that you can actually say that why they didn't actually succeed. Why that didn't happen, I don't know. There are just some companies or even some promoters that just the general public going, well, actually, I'd rather than put it in company A, I'll put it in company B instead, and maybe that was the reason why. But I think they're not bad businesses, the ones that we've put up that haven't reached the target amount, but they obviously just didn't click with our investor base for whatever reason.
And in your opinion, what has been the most successful company that you've seen come through Spark Crowdfunding and why?
Well, success is quite a strange one to kind of look at, really, because is the success the most money that has been raised? If that was the case, then that's clearly ASX, which raised 2.2 million with us. But if you look at kind of the other criteria, then there are some other strong candidates as well. We've not had no actual exits so far, but we have had companies that have gone on to raise further funding and therefore give our investors a paper increase in their investment, and that's happened now I think 5 times across the campaigns that we've had, and we're still hopeful that we're going to actually have an exit in the next 9 to 12 months as well. There are a couple of candidates that are have really kind of grown very very well and are being sought after as a potential acquisition as well. So would be delighted, and when that actually happens at some point, and that will be a real litmus test for our investors to go, okay, well, listen, the campaigns that we've backed are starting to actually come through to fruition and give us a return on our investment as well.
I think it's such a fascinating industry, and it's effectively just cutting out the middleman in a lot of in a lot of ways. But one peer-to-peer niche that I'm quite surprised hasn't been disrupted yet would be the residential mortgage market. I've seen a lot in the case of say commercial businesses and commercial residential, but in the sense that individuals can get a loan from another individual to get their own property. I understand there are currently some platform like I mentioned like the commercial side of things, but I suppose my question is, why aren't there any players within this space? And is this something that maybe Spark would consider even in the future?
I mean, obviously, a mortgage is a debt function, and we are purely equity, and so there are plenty of players in the market for debt, for peer-to-peer debt here in Ireland, and obviously further afield as well. So it's something that we probably won't get into, but it's something that probably should be considered by another player, perhaps. I can absolutely see the attraction of it. It is difficult for for young people seeking to get onto the property ladder to actually get that mortgage at first, and maybe if you pay a slightly bigger premium or bigger coupon rather on that investment, then you might be able to do it from peer to peer, and maybe people would be happy and willing to invest in that as well, knowing that people have got a bricks and mortar behind them when that actually happens, and there is some mechanism to repay the investor at some stage perhaps as well. But it's something that it's not something that we are actively seeking at the moment, and I don't see it really on the horizon at the moment either.
Yeah, the Irish residential property market is something I think we're all going to be having quite a close eye on for the next while, but we'll save that conversation for another day for now. Um, for a lot of people, Chris, like COVID was pretty disastrous, and a lot of businesses, of course, in Ireland were shutting down. But Spark has had quite the opposite reaction, you could say, and it seems from a recent article I saw on the RTE website that the amount of activity has actually grown, and I quote, our investor database grew by over 140% in the first 6 months of this year, as the ordinary Irish individual spent more time online and has higher levels of disposable income. So, with COVID, you touch wood, largely behind us now. I think like 92% of Ireland are vaccinated, and it's looking like on October 22nd, things will be getting back to normal. How do you envision 2022 panning out for Spark Crowdfunding?
Yeah, well, I mean, like all things, you need a critical mass in order to actually get going, and fortunately for us, as you said, COVID was actually quite good for us, and I say that carefully because I know for many people that it wasn't, and it was just fortunate that it worked out for us, and in during that time, and as you just indicated there were people who, if their job was stable and they had a bit more time, they had a bit more money because they weren't able to spend it, on holidays or going out for dinner or whatever it happens to be. And so, our database of investors grew and grew and grew, and we're delighted for it. So that happened to be at a quite nice time for us, in so much that we needed to actually grow our database quite significantly to get to this critical mass, which we think we've actually reached now. Of course, we want more and more and more investors, as many as we possibly can. That's what builds value into our business, and it means that the companies that go onto our platform can have a bit more confidence that they're going to reach that target that they set. So with that, I think 2022 is going to be a consolidation of the investors that we have on the database. We'll be making sure that we're treating them correctly and sensitively, and putting forward good projects for them to consider. And with that, the database will grow as well still, and I do expect to see, whether it's similar amounts of growth. I don't know. I'd like to think so, but I also think that we need to temper that somewhat as well, because that was quite unprecedented during those times for that growth. But we will get more and more in as more and more people hear about it, and as more and more people invest and hopefully have a good experience on Spark, they will tell others to potentially invest with us as well. So that's what I'm hoping for 2022.
You mentioned earlier on in our discussion that creating a marketplace is a careful balancing act, and obviously you don't want more investors than investees, and vice versa. At the same time, scaling up both sides can create strong network effects and lead to a strong competitive advantage, which you can see with the likes of Bitcoin and Facebook. How did you manage at the start do creating that balancing act between having the right amount of investors and the right amount of investees, whilst and then progressing to scale your user base?
Well, of course, at the very beginning, we were only having one client at a time, one investee at a time. So it wasn't. We didn't have to really do very much balancing, other than kind of have more, clients following on. So at the very start, we'd just have one campaign, and we would try and get investors to invest into that campaign. And both myself and my co-founder, we've got a good database of our own, kind of our little black book already, anyway, and that was one of the kind of catalysts, if you like, to starting Spark. So we knew a number of people who were active investors anyway. So we could go to them and say, okay, listen, we found a nice proposition for you to have a look at, and they did, and they had a look at it, and some of them invested, some of them didn't, and but yeah, but again, the PR at the beginning was very important to us as well, and we were very fortunate, and many of the media outlets kind of covered us with journals, and kind of I was on radio. The investee that we had, the first big investee that we had, anyway, was on kind of news outlets and channels. So it really worked very well, and we got a massive spike from that first big investment or investee onto the platform. So I mean, yeah, to be honest with you, you can't have too many investors, although you don't want to, like you just mentioned there with the peer-to-peer, that some investors get a little bit frustrated by the fact that the investments are disappearing after 1 or 2 seconds, and so. But with us, it's a bit more of a slow burn. You kind of you can go onto the platform, you contemplate whether you want to invest or not, and make your decision over a period of days, really. Although, having said that, with the first ASX campaign that we did, that sold out in 24 hours. So that was something that was unprecedented from our side of things. But yeah, so it's you can't really have too many investors, and we're very happy to have more and more and more as we grow in size as well. But the corollary of that is that we will have to get more and more investees in rather as well, and that's less tricky.
You mentioned also as well the EIIS scheme, particularly in relation to Irish startups, which is how I stumbled upon Spark Crowdfunding initially. I was wondering if you could talk to us a bit more about that for people that aren't aware.
Yeah, EIS, as I think I said, is a government tax incentive to try and persuade investors to invest in early stage Irish businesses. And simple as that. If you have some money to invest, and you want to put it through into these young startup companies, many of whom are excellent companies, and you get a 40% discount on your investment. So it's done as a tax relief. So you put your money in 2021. When you file your taxes for 2021 sometime after January of next year, you get a 40%. You get that 40% wiped off your tax, which is brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. So why wouldn't you avail of that if you have some money to invest? It's a great incentive. It could be better, and in many jurisdictions, outside Ireland, it is better, in fact. But nevertheless, we have to play with the cards that we have in front of us. But nevertheless, it's still a very good incentive for people to invest into early stage businesses.
Yeah, I think it's great because I mean the biggest struggle when investing, from my perspective, is limiting your downside. I don't really care about the upside. Like that takes care of itself. If you buy a good business, it will take care of itself. So in other words, your capital, essentially what's at risk is 60% of your principal. So with that said, what has been the average return investors have seen with Spark crowdfunding, and obviously what has been the success rate of those businesses going on after they've been funded?
Well, as I said, that we haven't actually had a return on investment yet. We have yet to get a company to actually have an exit. There are some paper raises, absolutely, and some of those have got a 3 or 4x raise on their investment, which is brilliant. And but it hasn't been solidified, and won't be solidified until there is that first exit. So, as I say, we're hoping that that's going to be in the next 12 months or so. But until that point, we can't actually, point to a success and a return. There are thoughts and ideas of what that return may be, and as I alluded to earlier on, some of those could even be 10x, 20x. Who knows? I mean, it could even be higher than that. If you backed a Facebook at the stages that we're backing our companies, or you back a Stripe at the stages that we're backing our companies, you'd be a very, very, very rich person now. If you'd done that with Stripe at that early stage, and that's what we're doing. We're allowing investors, get my terminology right. We're allowing investors to get in at the very, very early stages of some of these businesses, and it means that they are, very, some of them have great potential. And as I say, if you've kind of gone early with Stripe, as I say, you'd be a very rich person. But at the time, you couldn't. You had to be a VC, or you had to have massive amounts of money to invest through a private equity house or something like that. So you had to be quite a high net worth in order to invest in Stripe at the early stages. Whereas now, with crowdfunding, you can be in with €100. That's all it takes, and that's what we do. And we've democratized, as we like to call it. We've democratized the investment down to the people who have got €100, and they can do it even with such a moderate amount of money.
And just on the discussion of exit multiples, I know there's many analysts that believe that startups can't be valued. Like the biggest challenge being that many of them haven't got well-established operations with predictable cash flow patterns. And so I was wondering, what do you believe are the most important factors when you're looking at valuing a startup? And or would you concede with the narrative that would you concede with the narrative over numbers?
It's difficult. There's no two ways about it. It is tricky, and you can probably understand that every investee that comes to us has an overinflated idea of their own valuation, and so we have to kind of look at everything in the round. And so we take some guidance from some of the other investors that have gone into it as well, of course, but we also construct our own kind of opinion as to what that might be. So when I say other investors, that could be Enterprise Island, for example. So if they've gone through a competitive start fund, a CSF round with Enterprise Island, that would have gone in for 50,000 for a fight. Sorry, 50,000 for a 10% investment. So that is valuing the business at €500,000. So that's a good a place as any to start. And if people have gone on from the CSF and developed and shown that they've grown their business, shown that they've developed their app or whatever it happens to be that they've got, then absolutely we can see, okay, well, there's more value gone into the business since that CSF round. Okay, but is it now worth 750 or a million or 3 million or 7 million? These are the things that we have to look at. And we look at it, as I say, well, would we invest at that level into that business at this stage? And if we wouldn't, then, well, sorry guys, if you won't move from that inflated valuation, then you're not going onto our platform. So yes, it is difficult. We do have many criteria to look at to try and ascertain a line in the sand. But it's not us that is dictating what that is. The business actually is the way that is dictating the valuation. If we think it's ludicrous, then they're just not getting onto the site. If we think it's there or thereabouts, okay, well, we will put it in front of our investors, and it's our investors that decide whether it's a good valuation or not. They will look at it and go, okay, yeah, no, I'm happy to take a punt at that valuation. It looks sensible. I can see the market size. I can see the strong team. I can see all of these elements that go to make that valuation plausible, and investors will invest, or they might not, and in which case then the company goes, well, okay, maybe my valuation was too high, and that's why I've got no investment. And that's another strong reason why you need to be conservative in your estimation of the valuation of the business, particularly at this early stage.
I think that certainly gives peace of mind to the investors looking at the platform as well, knowing that there obviously has been some screening and the valuation of the companies has been double checked and triple checked, and like you say, cross referenced with other investors in the company. Chris, you've been fantastic, a really interesting chat. Just want to finish up with a couple of different questions. I work in sales, I work in new business development myself, and I couldn't help but ask. I know you've got CEO in your title on LinkedIn. I'm sure you get bombarded with different sales pitches and the kind of standard robotic messaging on LinkedIn. But I was wondering if you've ever come across any particular message or outreach that caught your attention, that made you laugh, or that you found interesting, that you actually humored and responded to.
I do get yeah. wouldn't say bombarded, but certainly there's a good flow of people trying to sell you stuff over the internet, and particularly LinkedIn, of course. I mean, it is a sales channel for many companies, and I include ourselves for that, of course. We're very prolific on it, and maybe a little bit too much as well sometimes. But anyway, that's another story. But are there any that really grab my attention? I can't think of any that do, but I do kind of look at some, and in fact, one of the things I think that was approached to me was by a company called ID Pal. ID Pal is a Irish company, state sponsored in so much that they've got funding through Enterprise Ireland and elsewhere as well. But they supply our KYC. So KYC is a know your client. So it's the type, when you're opening a bank account, you will have to show your passport and your proof of address and things like that. And of course, we have to do the same as well. And so we do that with each of our clients. And ID Pal, I think, approached me over LinkedIn, and it kind of piqued my interest, and because we were doing it manually up to that stage, and it was fine. We were doing it manually, and it was we didn't have massive numbers of investors. But as the platform has grown, obviously we've needed to automate that a bit, and so we use ID Pal now. I don't think their advert was particularly quirky, nevertheless, but nevertheless it caught my eye, and they got a sale out of it as well, which is good, and it's a very good business, and we're very happy to partner with them.
Yeah, and I think that's just a matter of fact with sales, that sometimes it just comes down to like the right solution coming along at the right time, the person seeing the value in it. So yeah. Last question that I've got for you today, Chris, before we finish up. We've spoken a lot, of course, about business and investing today, and it's been really great. But aside from energy, engineering, finance, do you have any other hobbies or anything else that makes you feel alive outside of the office?
Yeah, I've got two teenage daughters, which kind of occupy my time significantly, or but a bit less so now that they are actually getting to a stage where they are getting their independence. I have a dog as well, which I adore massively, and so I walk her kind of very often. But kind of away from that, I really enjoy mountain biking. I love I love skiing when we can actually go out the country and experience that. But I'm a very keen swimmer as well. In fact, I'm actually going off there in a few minutes, and I swim in a master's class, which sounds very grand, but it isn't at all. It's just kind of some old fogies, well, not old fogies, but kind of more mature people anyway. And we do, swim 2 kilometers in an hour, and I love that, and it's a kind of nice way of getting away from the humdrum of daily work. So it's a nice way of kicking back and relaxing a bit as well. So there's plenty of things that occupy me, but no, I like to keep active, and I like to do things outside the house as well, and most of those things are. No, I enjoy keeping active, which is good, particularly as I'm now in my mid 50s now, and I need to keep active.
You don't look a day over 21.
He said with a completely bald head here, so
You got to get a hat. I think we'll wrap it up there for today, Chris. Thank you so much for taking the time out to chat with us. It's been an absolute pleasure. For someone looking to find out more about yourself, Spark Crowdfunding, where should they go?
of course, onto our website, www.sparkcrowdfunding.com, and you can get in touch with us there, and you can drop us a line, and you'll find all our contact details there as well. So yes, that would be great if anybody wants to invest, or if you are a company seeking investment, we'd be delighted to talk to you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Chris. And for everyone listening, we'll catch you in the next one.